Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, helping you to find jargon-free information before choosing a professional to help solve your problems and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stewart Andrew Alexander.
Hi, and welcome everybody to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And on this segment of the show, I'm so pleased to say that we finally have family mediator Virginia Colin, who is the owner of Colin Family Mediation Group, LLC, and she's calling in all the way from Springfield in Virginia. Now, Virginia is an authority, or is considered to be an authority in the area of divorce mediation, and her topic for today is minimizing family damage during divorce. Now, that sounds like a really interesting topic. So, if you happen to be one of the many unfortunate people who are divorcing and you're out there looking for, seeking, hoping to find jargon-free information surrounding today's topic, then I highly suggest you stop what you're doing, take a break, log out of Facebook, stop the Twittering, the Instagramming, or whatever else you happen to be doing right now, or anything else which may cause a distraction. Down tools and get ready to tune in to what Virginia has to share with us today. So with that said, let's not keep her waiting a moment longer. Welcome to the show, Virginia.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. Now, let's just get the formalities out of the way first, Virginia. It goes without saying that anything you share with us today is not legal advice or legal assistance or any form of therapy. It's purely for the purpose of disseminating information. Now, would you just care to expand on that in your own words so everybody's absolutely clear about what we're trying to achieve today?
Yeah, that's actually what I do a lot of the time. I can give people a lot of information about the process of getting divorced, what happens if you tie yourself to handling everything primarily through the courts, and what some of the alternatives are that keep damage at a much lower level. And I'm not a lawyer and I do not give legal advice, just lots of information.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that for us, Virginia. So tell us a little bit about Colin Family Mediation Group, the people who you serve and the kinds of situations that they find themselves in when they initially reach out to you for your help.
Well, Colin Family Mediation Group is a group practice made up of 5 professional family mediators. We're in Springfield, Virginia. We serve throughout Northern Virginia. Many of our clients come to us for help with divorce decisions. And today that's the group that I will be focusing on. We help them primarily by providing mediation services, although there's some connected life coaching and some connected coaching about negotiating well that comes along with the package sometimes.
So, Virginia, when most people think about divorce, it conjures up ideas, concepts, the general perception of high conflict cases that they see on TV, right? So, in reality, what are the actual benefits of knowing about family mediation for people who are divorcing?
There are many. One is that it's private. Nobody's going to court filing a bunch of paperwork, some of which may become public, that's airing the family's dirty laundry. You know, it's private, it's confidential. You work it out with the mediator, and the only thing that has to be filed at court is the settlement terms that you agree upon. A second thing is that it's constructive. You know, if you go through the court, generally you're hiring 2 lawyers, and lawyers are trained to help you fight with each other. The best lawyers also know how to help you negotiate constructively, but a lawyer's job is to be a vigorous advocate for his client's interests. And either client's interests may, if you get into fighting about what mom wants and what dad wants, you usually end up doing enormous damage to mom, dad, and the kids. And it becomes very expensive. So, yes, we like a constructive process. Mediation is definitely a better approach, because then you have one mediator trying to help 2 people solve a problem instead of having 2 lawyers help them fight with each other. Another advantage is that mediation is faster than litigation. People can make their decisions as quickly as they are ready to do so. And my job as a mediator is to help them make voluntary, well-informed decisions, not just rush into it or give in to pressure from the other person to get it settled and done. But the reality is that everything can be decided fairly quickly once, people have gotten through the emotional process of grieving over the loss of a partner or the loss of a marriage and are ready to make big decisions. And some people actually do that before they even separate. They meet with a mediator, figure everything out, and write the entire terms of their divorce before one even moves out of the marital home. Gets done quickly. In court, there are so many steps that you don't know are going to be there in the court process. You have a hearing about this, and then you have a hearing about that, and then somebody files a motion about something else. It ends up taking 2 years, often, from the date of filing to the date of divorce.
Right.
And mediation it's sometimes done in a week or two. And sometimes it takes longer. It depends on the people. It depends on how fast the people are ready to go. But it doesn't have to be the dragged out process that court is. Mediation focuses on helping people express themselves clearly and listen well to each other. So we're actually helping people become better communicators. And that helps them build a strong foundation for cooperating as parents of their children after the divorce. So where, again, in court, people have a tendency to try to tear each other apart or talk about blame a lot. And it does enormous emotional damage to the parents and especially to the children. I mean, there's research that suggests that if you have parents in a high conflict divorce going through a prolonged custody battle, the effect that has on the children is the same as if they were emotionally or physically abused.
Wow.
It's really damaging. So we try to protect people from that. And in addition, because mediation is constructive and it is efficient, you avoid a lot of the financial damage that often comes with divorce. Here in Virginia, typically, if people are getting divorced through the lawyers and the court, each partner will spend $30,000 to $50,000. In mediation, we have a lot of cases that are they're at or under $2,000 for the entire divorce settlement agreement. It's just mind-boggling the financial damage you can avoid. And I can go on a long time about this.
Yeah, that's fine. These are great insights. I'm not stopping you. Please do share, Virginia.
Yeah, so mediation is a creative process. It lets you develop a solution that's really going to work for your family, given the personalities and the histories and the specific needs of the various members of the family. And you can do things in mediation that a judge couldn't even do if you asked the court to. Kind of a cute example is, what are we going to do about the family dog? If you ask a judge to decide that your dog is like your living room sofa, it's a piece of property. One of you gets it and the other one doesn't. But if you're mediating the question, then you can talk about, it's really expensive to take care of this animal. You brought him into the family. The kids adore him. Can you please help me with some of the expenses for the vet and food and the dog walker? Or you can talk about how you both love the pet and neither one of you really wants to give up the family dog. And is there a way that you can share custody of the dog like it's an animal, not like it's a living room sofa? So you can do what you want. And people in mediation, where it's going to be helpful, they make very detailed agreements, which you're not likely to get if you're just asking a court to rule on a question. A court will say liberal, flexible visitation, where in mediation you can say, this is the schedule that's going to work with our current job situations and our kids' schools and so on. And we agree that we will revisit it every year in June to plan ahead for the next school year. I had parents I worked with one time, they had not been married to each other. This one was not a divorce case, but they were two immigrants in the United States who had a child a little bit over 1 year old. The dad was in a situation where he could not afford to leave the United States because he was on a path to citizenship, and it didn't allow at that point. And the mom had to leave because her work visa had expired she couldn't legally stay in the United States. And there was a lot of fear and a lot of anger between them, but they both loved that baby. And they worked out an amazing plan. It protected the child. It gave the father lots of visitation time until the mom had to go back to Europe. It protected the dad's right to have more time with the child as the years went by, handled transportation for visits realistically, even though this is visits between continents, provided for the child having health coverage in the mother's home country, arranged for visits through Skype calls for the absent parent at least once a week, planned for the mother to bring the child to the United States to visit the dad at least once a year if the dad could pay for the plane tickets, and set child support really low so that he could save up to be able to pay those transportation costs to continue to have a true, close relationship with his child. They were just amazing.
So, Virginia, with all of these really, fantastic benefits that you've just shared with us, and I'm sure that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to family mediation. But with all of that, why isn't mediation top of mind when people are considering their options for divorce?
That is a question that I have thought about a lot. And it's partly, I think, failure of professional mediators to actively educate the public.
Right.
But it's also the result of suppression and opposition from groups of lawyers. Because if the public in general knew about family mediation, a lot of family law attorneys would be making less money. We really do take some cases almost away from lawyers. I mean, our clients certainly can still confer with lawyers as much as they want to, but if they do their own negotiating directly with each other with some professional support from a mediator, they're not going to be paying their lawyers for anywhere near as many hours of time. So, there's a financial incentive for lawyers to discourage clients from learning about mediation. And some of them do that. There are also wonderful lawyers who are supportive of mediation when that is what's going to be helpful for their clients. But there are certainly lawyers who try to keep it a secret and influence legislation in their states in such a way that it will be hard for anyone who's not a lawyer to be allowed to mediate and help the clients.
Now, would you just care just to share what's one of the biggest myths? Because again, this could be something I know you could speak about for hours and hours and hours, but share one of the biggest myths that you come across on a regular basis surrounding the topic of family mediation.
One is that mediators who are not lawyers don't know enough about family law. And that is a false idea that many lawyers would be happy to have everyone believe. So it kind of stays out there. And in some cases, it's an area where lawyers themselves are just not well educated. They learned how to be lawyers, and somehow in the law school they were in, nobody taught them about mediation. And they have the naive expectation that lawyers must be the right kinds of experts for all kinds of things, even though lawyers don't necessarily know anything about what's a good way to raise kids. They don't necessarily know a lot about family finances. And you have to look at legal decisions, but also child rearing and also assets and debts and incomes when you're negotiating a divorce. Lawyers just have kind of a naive belief that they're the experts, even when they're not.
So what would you say would be a common misconception around your industry as a whole?
One that I run into a lot is that retired judges make the best mediators. I have lost count of the number of lawyers I've talked to where I ask, do you refer some of your clients to mediation? And they say, yes, we always call this group in Northern Virginia of retired judges as our mediators. And I know I know how they operate. They don't do mediation in the way that I understand mediation. I help two people sit down face to face, unless that's not going to work for these specific people. Usually it's face to face, 3 people in the room. and talk things over and figure out what would be a good way to handle things. And they create their own solutions together. The retired judges put husband in one room, wife in a different room, and the judge goes back and forth between the two rooms, carrying information and proposals and responses. And it's really like a high-pressure settlement conference. It's not mediation where the couple is negotiating their solution. Or it's like a neutral case evaluation where the lawyers help the clients be all ready in case they have to go to trial. You call in the retired judge at the last minute. You work with the judge all through the morning and all through the afternoon, maybe long into the evening if that's what it takes. And they don't let you go. If they can avoid it, they don't let you go until you've reached a settlement. And it's coercive almost. And it's much more like the process of arguing in court than like the process of constructive facilitative mediation. And a lot of lawyers think that that's what mediation is. They think it's what these retired judges do. It's just wrong.
Well, that's a really interesting point, Virginia. And it kind of brings me on to my next question. Because most people, when they think about the divorce process, then they have this general idea that it is it's highly contentious. There's going to be a lot of conflict. So if that's the general perception amongst the public out there, what are their most common fears about using, the family mediation process? What do they fear the most about that?
I don't know, because mostly when I talk with people who were hesitant to begin mediation, once I describe how we work with them, then they're not afraid of it. There are exceptions, if there's a history of domestic violence and one person is very much intimidated by the other person, then they're really afraid that they're going to just give in under pressure, even though in the long run that is not in their best interest. And mediators know how to provide support, have another person in the room if necessary, or take the process slowly, or have one person participating by Skype rather than being physically present in the room to decrease the threat level. And we have strategies that we can use in that situation, but the fear is realistic. People who were abusive in their marriages have a tendency to be fairly abusive during the process of getting divorced if somebody doesn't put the brakes on them. So that's a realistic fear.
So it comes. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say more than fears about using mediation. I run into the more fundamental fears associated with divorce. People are afraid they're going to lose their kids. People are afraid there's just not going to be enough money after the divorce. They'll never be able to retire. Or they're afraid that they'll have no control over the process of getting divorced. And I think I've already addressed those concerns.
Yeah. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it partly goes back to what you mentioned earlier, that there's a lack of education around mediation, because if people know that the mediation process is private, that it's constructive, it's faster, that it helps them to become better communicators, it's more cost effective, and it's a creative process, and all these things that you mentioned before, then once they become aware of that, then I could imagine how these fears then slowly start to dissipate because they're being educated. Am I along the right lines there, Virginia?
Yeah. And another factor is that participating in mediation doesn't mean that you give up access to help from an attorney. A lot of people will hire an attorney as a consultant to give them advice,
right,
and to look over the proposed divorce settlement before they sign it. They can do their own negotiating and mediation, but they still have an advocate advising them.
So if I fear not having enough money after being divorced, or not having access to my children, and all those, those common fears that people have, what can I do to actually get past those fears? And what do you recommend, Virginia?
Well, using mediation to resolve as many questions as you can certainly helps with the financial fears. If you're not giving $50,000 or $60,000 to a couple of attorneys, then you have a whole lot more money to use as a foundation as you step forward into the next phase of your life. About the kids, we focus on building a foundation for cooperative co-parenting, and we focus on helping parents think seriously about what's going to be best for their children, which might not be the same as what the parent would most like to see happen. And that is a difficulty for a lot of parents. They think what's best for me is what's best for my children. And sometimes you have to go a little deeper to see whether you're advocating that position because that's what you want, that's what will be convenient or gratifying for you, or whether you're advocating that position because you truly believe that that will be better for your child.
So we spoke earlier about the benefits of family mediation, but what would be a perceived obstacle that you come across on a regular basis that may be preventing people from seeking the help of a family mediator like yourself?
We have really already answered that. The primary obstacle, I think, is ignorance. And ignorance not in the sense of being stupid, but in the sense of not knowing something. People just don't know that family mediation exists.
Right.
And some of those who do know that family mediation exists don't know very much about how much can be accomplished in mediation. So it's just ignorance.
So you've been around for quite some time. I've done my research, okay? I know you've been helping people out there with their divorce procedures for quite some time. So could you just share an example of how you've been able to help people who are divorcing to succeed in getting the transformation that they were looking for when they initially reached out to you for your help?
Well, in the beginning, in the first phone call with someone who may become a client, I'm oriented towards helping them figure out what they feel comfortable handling on their own, figure out what they can educate themselves about, because there's a lot of information freely available on the internet and in books, and then figure out what questions do they need to ask a lawyer. So in the beginning, I'm saying mediation is a service that is available to you. And these are some things to think about so you can make a good decision about whether mediation is right for you.
We are listening to family mediator Virginia Colin, and her topic today is minimizing family damage during divorce. Now, Virginia, with that in mind, and for those people who are listening in right now, what's the most common pitfall or even mistake when it comes to minimizing the damage to one's family during divorce?
Well, certainly one of the biggest mistakes is thinking that once you know you have to get divorced, the first thing you should do is rush out and find a lawyer who will fight for what you want.
Right.
Really, the first thing you should do is calm down.
Which is hard to do, right? There's a lot of emotion involved.
But, give yourself a little time to deal with the emotions before you try to deal with the legal decisions. Because, divorce is a life change. It's not just a legal problem to be resolved. It's a big change. So, if there's a crisis, you do need to get a lawyer to protect you right away from some awful thing that might happen, like your spouse taking all the money and moving to the Cayman Islands. If it's an emergency, then yes, go get a lawyer right away to protect yourself. But if it's not an emergency, take some time, educate yourself, work with a therapist if that's something that you need, do some reading, find a support group if that's something you need. Some people do meditation or yoga as the first step to calm down and get myself ready to deal with this. There's plenty of time for finding a lawyer to give you good advice when you're ready.
So, Virginia, one of the main reasons for me starting this series, Let's Talk Divorce, is because I myself was a child of divorce. So when I was 8-9 years old, my parents went through a very volatile, there was lots of violence, there was lots of blood, lots of fighting, and all of that took place right in front of me as a young 8-9-year-old little boy. And of course, I didn't have the resources to be able to process that. So my way of dealing with it was to blame myself. So I blamed myself for the breakup of my mother and father. So I carried the guilt of everything that was happening in front of me, and carried that through my teenage years. When I left school, it had a negative impact on the direction that I went into, the relationships I had, the friendships I had, the jobs that I chose at the beginning. And it took me a very, very long time to become aware of the negative impact the separation had on my life. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that I actually started to work on myself and to become aware of, the negative impact. I'm sort of repeating myself, but what I'm trying to say to you here right now, the main reason why I'm starting this show is to give those children out there, the people who I like to call the invisible voices, because that's how I felt like I was invisible and I didn't have a voice, but to give them a voice through experts like yourself who come onto the show. And then hopefully there are people who are going through the process of divorce or considering going through the process of divorce. And maybe they're in that situation where there is a lot of conflict and there are children involved and they're caught up in the middle of it all. Hopefully by listening to experts like you, that they change their perspective of how they communicate with each other, and especially in front of the children, because both you and I know that children pick up on everything. You cannot hide it from the children. So if that's the situation, if there is somebody right now, whether listening to the show today or 5 years or 10 years from now, and they find themselves in that situation where they are facing divorce and there are children involved, what would you say to them? What's the best piece of not advice, obviously not legal advice, but what information would you like to share with them that could be helpful to help them through that particular stage they're going through right now?
Well, the experience that you have described is it's fairly extreme. Sadly, not uncommon, but certainly more extreme than what some people experience. And sadly, it may not be the divorce that was so damaging for you. If your parents had continued to live together with that level of violence and hostility and blood involved, you would have been a very damaged child that way too.
Right.
But in an extreme situation like that, I do believe the most important thing is safety. And if it's not safe to live together with your spouse, then you need to look around for what organizations or people will help you get out of an unsafe situation, get your children out of an unsafe situation. In the best case scenario, once a couple in high conflict has separated and gotten some support from good people who care about them and want them to have good futures and want their children to have happy, healthy lives, then they may be able to recognize, even though we've had so much conflict with each other, we need to find a way to resolve this. Right. We need to make a plan that's going to make it possible for our kids to feel safe and well-loved by both parents. If it's possible to do that, that's what we should do. Even though we've got this awful history of conflict, if we can find some way to cooperate as parents, to let our kids have good lives, that's what we should be working on. And that's a place where a mediator and or a good therapist may be able to be very helpful.
Great. Thanks for sharing that with us, Virginia. So let me ask you this then. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, I'm going to be a family mediator. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm sure that the path to where you find yourself now as a family mediator was a long, winding path. You just didn't wake up one morning and, this is what I'm going to do. Things happened along the way that inspired you, that led you to become a family mediator. So with that said, could you just share with us, what was it? What's your backstory? What led you to becoming who you are today and what you do and how you help people?
A background factor for me is that I myself was divorced early in the 1990s, and the process I went through was horrible. It took a long time. Neither my husband nor I understood what the process was going to be like. Neither of us understood what our lawyers were doing. Eventually, we fired them and represented ourselves. And frankly, I did better than my lawyer had done.
Right.
But, it was long and horrible. So that's just kind of the background. I thought there should be a better way. People shouldn't have to go through this. Mm-hmm. But what really changed my career path was an experience I had late in the 1990s. I had a friend who had been involved in a custody battle with his ex-wife for more than a year and a half. He had spent somewhere between $40,000 and $45,000 defending the idea that his kids were better off continuing to live with him, while she kept finding another reason to file another motion to say, no, those kids should be with me. And nothing was resolved. So they had a court hearing, and the judge told them to do what the child's guardian ad litem had recommended. Guardian ad litem is a lawyer who's supposed to represent what's best for the kids, not necessarily what the kids want, but what's best for them. So the judge said, do what the guardian ad litem recommended. And neither parent thought it was a good idea. So these people with a year and a half history of fighting about custody clearly they're headed for being back in court again. Mm-hmm. And I said to my friend, look, being a Quaker, I have learned some conflict resolution skills. Would you like to try a different approach? And he said yes. And his ex-wife said yes to the same question. And I mediated that case, which is very unusual. I mean, my friend's a nice guy, but in relation to his ex-wife, age is through the roof.
That's funny.
They had huge amounts of anger and zero trust in each other. And they couldn't be in the same room and have a constructive conversation. So I actually did this by shuttle mediation. But the short answer is they worked it out. After a few months of conversations back and forth, they came up with a custody and visitation plan that they could both live with. The ex-wife wrote it up as a consent order. The judge, probably breathing a deep sigh of relief, signed off on it. And those kids didn't have to live in a war zone anymore.
Right. Perfect.
And I thought, wow, this was horrible. This was very stressful and awful. And there can't be a lot of people who want to put themselves in the middle of this kind of conflict and try to make it better. But I put myself there and it worked. And it made life better for those kids and for their parents. So maybe this is the kind of work that I should be doing.
So with that said then, Virginia, when you think back to all of the people who you've been able to help to achieve that transformation that they were looking for, on a deep down personal level, what does it give you? What do you get from that? And how does it make you feel?
When mediation is successful, it's wonderful. I know that I have helped people make a good plan for how the various members of the family can move forward with their lives. I know that I've helped them avoid a tremendous amount of emotional damage. I've helped them avoid a tremendous amount of financial damage. It's very gratifying to do that. And mediation is not always that wonderfully successful. Sometimes I can help people reduce the damage, but really keeping it to a minimum is more than they're able to do. But it's very satisfying. It's, the same as teachers or therapists or the good lawyers in the world. If you help people, it just makes you feel good.
Yeah. And it's not something that you can pretend to like, right? You've just really got to have a love and genuine passion for helping people in the situations that they find themselves in.
Yeah, I think that is true, that the best family mediators, generally, this is a calling.
So, listen, Virginia, we're coming towards the end of the show. So before we close out with our last question for today, in your opinion, what's the most important thing people who are divorcing should consider when evaluating a family mediator like yourself?
It's important to consider whether you and also your spouse can trust the mediator you're going to be working with. You know, to be trustworthy, a mediator needs to have compassion, good training, and experience. You don't become a skilled family mediator right away after taking the first training program. It takes a while to develop. But what's really important is that both parties trust the mediator to do the best she can or the best he can to help them create the best plan they are able to create.
Right. So what are some of the things that they should be looking for in a mediator that they're evaluating? Are there any kind of qualifications, or what are some of the telltale signs?
It can actually be pretty hard to tell. You know, nationally, there are no standards for licensing or certifying family mediators or any other kind of mediators as far as I know. States do not have anything. It's not illegal for anyone in any of the 50 United States to hang out a shingle and say, I'm a mediator, pay me and I will mediate for you.
Okay.
So it's challenging to figure out who's good. But if you do a little research, look at what they say about themselves on their websites, look for online reviews, look for referrals from recommendations from people you know. You want to find somebody who has a good heart, somebody who is well trained. And if you check, people can tell you where they got their training, how much training they got, whether they're still getting more training every year. And you can get a feel for how much experience they have and get a feel for how they approach things. There are mediators who just want to help you make the decisions that you need to make to get the legal document together so that you can be divorced. And that's the service that some people want. And there are mediators who are really going to try to go deeper than that with you and help you think things through, work a little on the communication, learn more about kids, think about what's coming next, weigh the pros and cons of one financial plan or another financial plan for how you divide things up, and come up with a more complete plan for how you build the foundation for the members of the family to be able to go forward. And ideally, all have safe, financially secure, well-loved lives. And one more thing, just for history, I'm the immediate past president of the Academy of Professional Family Mediators, which I neglected to mention earlier. That's a good way to find a good family mediator. The people who bother to join the Academy of Professional Family Mediators are the people who are really passionate about providing high-quality, ethical family mediation services.
Well, Virginia, this has been such a great conversation today. I just got this feeling that, you've got this true, genuine passion for what you do, and you're really, really good at what you do. So good, in fact, I think I'm going to file for divorce just so that I can be your client. How does that sound?
That sounds like a terrible idea.
Terrible idea?
I suspect that you have a lovely wife.
I do, but you're so good. I want to be
You can work with a mediator to help you solve the problems within your marriage.
I want to be your client. I'm fine with it. Anyway, all fun aside, Virginia, if somebody feels that they want to know more about minimizing damage to their family during the divorce process, what would be the best way to get in touch with you? One, and two, what will actually happen when they do? So if you could just paint a picture so they know exactly what's going to happen when they do reach out to you and they know that there's no risk in doing so.
Well, they can phone me or send me an email message to get things started. And the first step of really getting started is an initial completely free phone consultation. Okay. So I will talk things over with anyone in Virginia who's contemplating divorce or moving toward divorce or going through divorce. I'll do a half-hour free phone call with anybody, and I don't try to sell them mediation. Mediation really sells itself if it's the right solution for you. But I'll just talk with people about what's your situation, what questions do you have, what do you need to know, how can I help you, and go from there.
Perfect. So would you care to share your contact details, your phone number, email, website address, etc.?
Certainly.
Go ahead.
My phone number is 703-864-2101. And my email address is mediatorq q@gmail.com. And people sometimes hear that wrong. They think I'm saying Mediator 2. It's Mediator Q as in questions or Quaker at gmail.com. And I'm also the co-author of a small book called The Guide to Low-Cost Divorce in Virginia. Very specific, tells you what you need to know, doesn't have a lot of extra words, and is easy to find online. Okay. And both the phone number and the email address are readily available on my website, colinfamilymediationgroup.com. And the only thing tricky about the website is that Colin has one L and no S, like Colin Firth.
No problem. We will have those contact details on the website. So nothing's just like straight with this woman. She always got some kind of angle. But anyway, listen, that's all we have time for today, ladies and gentlemen. So let me remind you once again that we have been listening to the wonderful, the amazing, the lovely family mediator, Virginia Colin. Thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today, Virginia. You have certainly, without a doubt, hands down, 100% demonstrated that you are a true educator, advocate, and I'd go as far as saying a trustworthy advisor for your client success. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
You are so welcome, my dear. And I'd also like to take a moment to say a big thank you to you. Yes, our listener tuning in right now. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. We know you're also very busy. And thanks for joining us on what I can only describe as a very insightful and informative conversation with one of the leading family mediators in the Springfield, Virginia area today. Again, her name is Virginia Colin. Make sure you do check her out, give her a call, visit her website, send her an email. I'm sure that whatever you do decide to do, ladies and gentlemen, after listening to Virginia today, you are going to be in a great place to address your current situation. So that's it for today, folks. Again, my name is Stewart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more top divorce professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.